A-G-E-R-E, I'm sorry, K-G, yeah, Yum Sum, K-G Yum Sum. Most powerful. Although a wife may be equal to her husband in advancement, in spiritual consciousness, she should not be vainly proud. Sometimes it happens that the wife comes from a very rich family, as did Devahuti, the daughter of Emperor Swayambhuva. She could have been very proud of her parentage, but that is forbidden. The wife should not be proud of her parental position. She must always be submissive to the husband and must give up all vanity. As soon as the wife becomes proud of her parentage, her pride creates great misunderstanding between the husband and the wife, and their nuptial life is ruined. Devahuti was very careful about that, and therefore it is said here that she gave up pride completely. Devahuti was not unfaithful. The most sinful activity for a wife is to accept another husband or another lover. Chanakya Pandita has described four kinds of enemies at home. If the father is in debt, he is considered to be an enemy. If the mother has selected another husband in the presence of her grown up children, she is considered to be an enemy. If a wife does not live well with her husband but deals very roughly, then she is an enemy. And if a son is a fool, he is also an enemy in family life. But if the wife or mother accepts another husband, I'm sorry, if the wife does not live well with her husband but deals very roughly, then she is an enemy. And if a son is a fool, he is also an enemy. In family life, father, mother, wife, and children are assets. But if the wife or mother accepts another husband in the presence of her husband or son, then, according to Vedic civilization, he is considered an enemy. A chaste and faithful woman must not practice adultery. That is a greatly sinful act. All glories to Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Okay, so here we have a really uh, very, let's say, statement that makes sense, is correct, and should be followed by everyone in married life. So it says here, I'll just read the verse again. Working sanely and diligently, she pleased her very powerful husband, giving up all lust, pride, envy, greed, sinful activities, and vanity. Well, let's see. When someone is vain, it means that they are really puffed up and they uh, have, a problem of being thinking themselves greater than anybody else. So, uh, once you look that word up, vain, VAN, just want to make sure I'm not mispronouncing or uh, not uh, not correctly saying what it is.
Vain.
Vane, vain or vanity. The other
To
vanity.
be vain may.
Yeah,
Let's see. Mm, Here it is a Merriam-Webster, I'm saying. A movable device elevated to attached to an elevated object. It's one thin, flat, curved object that is rotated around by an axis by
no,
a web or flat, expanded part of feather,
no.
feather fastened to a shaft. I'm not seeing anything related to human psychology.
Vanity
Vanity,
means they're puffed up, like really have a.
yeah, so vanity, inflated pride.
Yeah, that's it.
Vanity is there, not vain. Vain is a different word, it seems.
Okay, so working sanely and diligently, she pleased her very powerful husband, giving up all lust, pride, envy, greed, sinful activities, and vanity. Okay. And Prabhupada says, here are some of the qualities of a great husband's great wife. Kardama Muni is great by spiritual qualification. Such a husband is called Teji Yamsam, most powerful. Although a wife may be equal to her husband in advancement in spiritual consciousness, she should not be vainly proud. Sometimes it happens that the wife comes from a very rich family, as did Devahuti, the daughter of Emperor Swayambhuva. She could have been very proud of her parentage, but that is forbidden. The wife should not be proud of her parental position. She must always be submissive to the husband and must give up all vanity. As soon as the wife becomes proud of her parentage, her pride creates a great misunderstanding between the husband and wife, and their nuptial or married life is ruined. Devahuti was very careful about that. And therefore, it is said here that she gave up pride completely. Devahuti was not unfaithful. That means she was faithful. So you have a double negative, so it cancels out. So it means that she was faithful. When you use a double negative, it's for uh, extra emphasis about something. So Devahuti was, uh, well, it says a wife must be submissive to the husband and must give up all vanity. It means all types of pride. As soon as the wife becomes proud of her parentage, her pride creates great misunderstanding between husband and wife, and her nuptial life is ruined. Her married life is ruined. Nuptial means married. Devahuti was very careful about that, and therefore it is said that she gave up pride completely. Devahuti was not unfaithful. In other words, she was very faithful. The most sinful activity for a wife is to accept another husband or another lover. Chanakya Pandita has described four kinds of enemies at home. If the father is in debt, he is considered to be an enemy. If the mother has selected another husband in the presence of her grown up children, she is considered to be an enemy. If a wife does not live well with her husband, but deals very roughly, then she is an enemy. And if a son is a fool, he is also an enemy. In family life, father, mother, wife, and children are assets. But if the wife or mother accepts another husband in the presence of her husband or son, then according to Vedic civilization, she is considered an enemy. A chaste and faithful woman must not practice adultery. That is greatly sinful act. That is a greatly sinful act. So adultery means that someone is cheating on their uh, spouse or husband or wife. Well, unfortunately, today there is a lot of cheating going on. Husbands is uh, has different paramours, meaning lovers, or the wife has different lovers, and it causes havoc in the family and eventually divorce. And the person that suffers the most is the child or the children, because now there's divorce and there's court uh, uh, yeah, you have to go to court to decide who has the primary uh, primary uh, uh, primary right to maintain the child, and sometimes the child has to be with the mother, and other times the child has to be with the father, and the mother and father are always angry at each other and separated, and it's just hellish for the child. So divorce is the worst thing to a mother and father can do, and it's a great way to destroy the child's psychology. It puts children in a lot of deep anxiety when parents begin to hate each other and argue, and then there's divorce, and then there's uh, the child stays sometimes with the mother and then sometimes with the father, and it's just very, very stressful. Okay, so it's absolutely necessary for the wife to be submissive to her husband. It says in here about Devahuti, she could have been very proudful. I'm sorry, she could have been very proud of her parentage, but that is forbidden. The wife should not be proud of her parental position. She must always be submissive to the husband and must give up all vanity, all pride. As soon as the wife becomes proud of her parentage, her pride creates great misunderstanding between a husband and wife, and their nuptial or married life is ruined. Devahuti was very careful about that, and therefore, well, I mean, she's born in the most illustrious family, Swayambhuva Manu, and so uh, it's like in the early time of creation, and her father is the Emperor Swayambhuva Manu. So she would have, a very the tendency to be very proud of her parentage. However, Prabhupada says, but that is forbidden. The wife should not be proud of her parental position. She must always be submissive to the husband and must give up all vanity, all pride. As soon as the wife becomes proud of her parentage, her pride creates great misunderstanding between the husband and wife, and their nuptial life or their married life is ruined. Devahuti was very careful about that, and therefore it is said here that she gave up pride completely. Devahuti was not unfaithful. The most sinful activity for a wife is to accept another husband or another lover. Chanakya Pandit has described four kinds of enemies at home. If the father is in debt, he is considered to be an enemy. If the mother has selected another husband in the presence of her grown up children, she is considered to be an enemy. If a wife does not live well with her husband but deals very roughly, then she is an enemy. And if his son is a fool, he is also an enemy. In family life, father, mother, wife, and children are assets, but if the wife or mother accepts another husband in the presence of her husband or son, then, according to Vedic civilization, she is considered an enemy. A chaste and faithful woman must not practice adultery. That is a greatly sinful act. Adultery means uh, you're married, but you have someone else that you claim to love, and uh, and there's usually divorce, and so it just creates havoc and misery for the children. Okay, that's why it says uh, in family life, father, mother, wife, and children are assets. But if the wife or mother accepts another husband in the presence of her husband or son, then according to Vedic civilization, she is considered an enemy. A chance, a chaste and faithful woman must not practice adultery. That is a greatly sinful act. Well, how about the husband? He should not also practice adultery, going around with other women. He should be satisfied having one wife. Now, we see that, like uh, in Muslim families, the husband is legally permitted to have four wives, right? So there was once this devotee, and he had two wives, and he used to walk uh, with his two wives, and he was very proud. And as time went on, uh, his two wives threw him out of the house, and they became lesbians. And now he didn't have any wife. You know, he was really proud that he had two wives. And now he's zero wives. So we should basically be satisfied with one wife, not desiring two wives, because it's hard enough just having one wife. If you have two wives, your problem is doubly complicated. And so there was this one devotee. He had two wives, and sometimes he promenade with his two wives. He's very proud of the fact he has two wives. And then it turned out that his two wives became lesbians, and they threw him out of the house. So uh, one should be happy to have one wife and take good care of her, and not have complications that are devastating for children. Okay. Now it says here, Devahuti could have been very proud of her parentage, but that is forbidden. The wife should not be proud of her parental position. She must always be submissive to the husband and must give up all vanity or pride. As soon as the wife becomes proud of her parentage, her pride creates great misunderstanding between the husband and wife, and their nuptial or married life is ruined. Okay.
Is it good? Brutal adoption.
Okay. I guess maybe I'm mispronouncing it, pronouncing it. But nuptial, I say nuptial, but let's say nuptial means married.
Yeah,
Uh, you want to look it up and see how it's pronounced?
yeah. Yeah, it says nuptial or nuptial, both are NUP.
Okay, nuptial. All right. So as soon as the wife becomes proud of her parentage, her pride creates great misunderstanding between the husband and wife, and their nuptial life is ruined. Devahuti was very careful about that, and therefore it is said here that she gave up pride completely. Now, is there any, let's say, uh, value in being proud? Well, someone might be proud for some achievement that they've made. Uh, but in marriage, uh, if the wife is proud and feels superior to her husband, then the nuptial life or the happy life between a husband and wife is ruined. So Devahuti was very careful about that, and therefore it is said that she gave up pride completely. Devahuti was not unfaithful. That means she was faithful. As I said, when there's a double negative, uh, not unfaithful means she was very faithful. The most sinful activity for a wife is to accept another husband or another lover. Chanakya Pandit has described four kinds of enemies at home. If the father is in debt, he is considered to be an enemy. If the mother has selected another husband in the presence of her grown up children, she is considered to be an enemy. If a wife does not live well with her husband, but deals very roughly, then she is an enemy. And if a son is a fool, he is also an enemy. In family life, father, mother, wife, and children are assets. But if the wife or mother accepts another husband in the presence of her husband or son, then according to Vedic civilization, she is considered an enemy. A chaste and faithful woman must not practice adultery. That is a greatly sinful act. That makes sense. And people should adhere to one wife or one husband, not two wives or three wives or four wives, or the opposite, uh, two husbands and two or three husbands, etc. Now, there was in Vedic times there. Who's the famous woman who had four husbands? Draupadi, yeah, she had four husbands. Okay, yeah. Well, that was an exception. Uh, she married. That's because when uh, uh, who's the husband of Draupadi?
Arjuna, right?
Arjuna, yeah. Arjuna, one day, what happened? He came back from, somewhere, and he told his mother that he had a wife, and uh, I forget exactly how it happened, but
Basically, he wins her in that Swayamvara, right? He goes there and he there's a bow and arrow
yeah, he
competition.
wins the
He
competition.
wins the competition, and then he comes back saying to the mother, who was actually in the middle of a performance of some uh, worshipping, and then she's focused on it, and then he goes and then introduces saying that he won a prize, and then because it's considered in this case Swayamvara, like she's considered a prize because he rightfully won her. But then she considers always she has given the kids instructions that whatever the one earns, everybody
They
equally
should
shares.
equally share and that prize
Yeah.
with the other, uh, you know, children. So then he had to share his wife with his other brothers, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. The mother said, "Well, you should uh, share it with your brothers, you know." So now he had to share it with his brothers because his mother said so, and therefore each brother had uh, private time with the wife. She had like four husbands, and so she would spend whenever it was the the time where one of the brothers should spend with the wife, the other brothers had to stay away. You know, one time Arjuna broke that principle because there was, there was a threat of invasion
Right.
by enemies, and when he came and interrupted his brother, uh, one of his brothers who was spending time with the wife, he broke that vow, of not disturbing the brother who's spending time with the wife. But he said, but it was an emergency. There was enemies. They were going to invade, and but still, he was like criticized for interrupting the privacy of the time that one brother was spending with the wife. There's a lot of interesting things that happen in uh, when you have a wife that has more than one husband, or a husband uh, who has more than one wife. Uh, and so and there was one devotee, as I said before, he had two wives. So he used to come to Mangalarti with two wives. So he'd walk in with, holding hands with two wives. And then eventually the two wives threw him out of the house and became lesbians. And now he had no wife. So uh, people should be satisfied with a man should be satisfied with one wife. But when a man has more than one wife, well, uh, it becomes problematic. There was one man who had five wives, and whenever he would come home after working hard, the five wives would grab him and try and pull him into their bedroom. So it was very stressful for the man because and dangerous because each wife would try and pull him in her bedroom, and he would be assaulted uh, instead of being the having a happy life. So there are problems if you have more than one wife. There's already problems having one wife, but when you have more than one wife, then it's even more complicated. So it's better to be satisfied with one wife. Yes.
Maharaj, according to the Vedic principles, if the husband or the wife dies, then is it okay for them to remarry, or is that also not allowed according to the Vedic tradition?
Uh, that's a good question. Usually, it's not really a good thing for a wife to marry again. Uh, when vice versa, it's not good if the wife dies, the husband gets married to someone else. But sometimes, like 2 weeks after the husband dies, the wife gets married to someone else, or a couple of weeks after the wife dies, the husband marries someone else. Not good at all. Um, okay, so one time there were four men that loved the same woman, and she became very sick, and so, uh, but she had four, let's see, persons that loved her, and so therefore, when she became very very sick, and it looked like she was going to die, so one of the persons that was in love with her uh, left and tried to find uh, a way to heal her sickness. And another one left to become a doctor so he could, you know, save her from dying. And another one, he also did something, I forget. And then the last one, uh, he stayed with her all the time. Yeah, and you're, very sick. And then in the end, uh, when and she was like basically in a coma, and but eventually she came out of the coma, and now she had to choose which one she was going to marry. So she chose the one that always stayed with her through her, you know, stage where she was in coma, because she said he actually loved me because he didn't go here or there. He always stayed with me. Yeah. So that for her, that was a sign that he loved her the most. The one became a very famous doctor. Another one uh, went here or there to find a cure for her and so forth. But she chose to marry the one who always stayed with her in her state of coma. Okay. All right. So, yeah, uh, Devahuti could have been very proud of her parentage, but that is forbidden. A wife should not be proud of her parental position. She must always be submissive to the husband and must give up all vanity, all pride. As soon as the wife becomes proud of her parentage, her pride creates great misunderstanding between the husband and wife, and their nuptial or married life is ruined. Devahuti was very careful about that, and therefore it is said here that she gave up pride completely. Devahuti, Devahuti was not unfaithful. That means she was faithful. The most sinful activity for a wife is to accept another husband or another lover. Chanakya Pandit has described four kinds of enemies at home. If the father is in debt, he is considered to be an enemy. If the mother has selected another husband in the presence of her grown up children, she is considered to be an enemy. If a wife does not live well with her husband but deals very roughly, then she is an enemy. And if his son is a fool, he is also an enemy. In family life, father, mother, wife, and children are assets. But if the wife or a mother accepts another husband in the presence of her husband or son, then, according to Vedic civilization, she is considered an enemy. A chaste and faithful wife must not practice adultery. That is a greatly sinful act. Yeah, I remember when my father died. My mother was relatively very young at that time, but she never got married, and she always remained faithful to her husband, although he was dead, or, like my father. And she always took care of her children and remained celebrate the rest of her life. But when my father died, my mother was relatively very young. I think she was only like 30 years old, but she never got married to anyone else. She could have if she wanted to, but she chose not to. Okay, so are there any questions? So as soon as the wife becomes proud of her parentage, her pride creates great misunderstanding between the husband and wife, and their nuptial or married life is ruined. Devahuti was very careful about that, and therefore it is said that she gave up pride completely. Devahuti was not unfaithful. Okay, so is that a good thing? Well, some women would argue about that. You know, what's wrong about being proud to be, to have uh, a husband who's less illustrious than the wife because of family, but that'll ruin the marriage. A wife should always be submissive to her husband, and the ideal example is Gandhari. When she got married to her husband who was blind, she put a blindfold on her eyes so that she would never feel superior to her husband. And that is very significant, uh, gesture by the wife, by the wife. It wasn't Devahuti, but by the wife Gandhari. She never wanted to feel superior to her husband. So that is the proper psychology of man-woman relationship. The husband always wants to feel superior to the wife. Nowadays, it's not like that. It's like, oh, it should be equal. Or sometimes, the wife works and the husband stays at home and takes care of the children. It happens, well, not all the time, but it happens a lot nowadays. Uh, so the wife is the brings the money and works, and the husband stays at home and takes care of the children.
Is that good, Maharaj? Is that okay?
Well, it's not the normal way. Is it okay? Well, there are husbands that accept to do that, you know.
House husband.
Yeah, housewife, become the housewife. Take care of the kids, cook, clean the house, so forth. It's not really good. No, it's not good at all. But there are examples of that today.
Maharaj, I had another question.
Yeah.
If like there are families, which even in devotee communities where the husband and wife cannot get along well
Yeah,
and they separate,
yeah.
they get a divorce, and so after that, are they allowed to remarry? Means both husband and wife, from Vedic perspective.
Well, separation is permitted in Krishna consciousness. There might be a problem with the husband or might be a problem with the wife. But remarrying is not a good thing. Uh, they should remain faithful to each other, even though they don't live with each other. Right? And that gives time for the husband or wife to straighten out, to overcome their weaknesses, and then they assume again living together. So the husband or wife should wait patiently to see if the spouse uh, overcomes their weakness or whatever it is that's causing the breakup. Um, so there's many histories in Vedic history of a wife who completely sacrifices everything for her husband, or a husband who completely sacrifices everything for the wife, and always remains chaste, uh, and waiting for the spouse to get better. You know, uh, sometimes there are cases where a wife becomes completely an invalid, and there are cases where husbands just walk away. They don't want to deal with the wife that's completely invalid, you know, because of some kind of sickness, or the wife walks away from the husband who's completely invalid. There are types of diseases where, let's say, the husband uh, gradually becomes a vegetable, you know, not able to take care of himself, and whereas before he was healthy and handsome, and then all of a sudden he has this type of disease in which he gradually becomes more and more overwhelmed by this medicine, by this sickness, and can't function anymore. And then he becomes an invalid, whereas before he was full of vitality and everything, and now he's an invalid, and the wife has to choose either to take care of him or to just say, okay, it's too much for me. I give up, and leaves. You know, so you can imagine what a stressful situation that is for the wife and for the husband. Let's say the husband gets a type of disease where gradually he becomes more and more unable to take care of himself, and eventually becomes a total invalid. So that means that the wife has to work and at the same time take care of her invalid husband. So that puts a great strain on her. But there are women that have not left the husband, and there are other examples of women who have left the husband because it's too difficult, too stressful for them. There are certain diseases that are gradually, uh, get worse and worse until the husband becomes an invalid. It can't work, can't do anything, can't go to the bathroom by himself, and needs to be helped in every way. Whereas before he was full of vitality and very healthy. So uh, then that puts a great stress on the wife because there's, there might be children, and now the husband is completely incapacitated and can't do anything. And the wife has to take care of, the children, and has to earn money. In other words, she has to work, and at the same time, she has to take care of the children. It becomes very, very stressful. Sometimes women just walk away, just abandon the husband, and he ends up usually in some kind of a hostel or something like that, where uh, he is abandoned by the wife. So these type of situations are very, very stressful, and sometimes women can put up with it, and they're very, courageous, and sometimes it's too much for them to see her husband deteriorate until he's basically a vegetable, and they just walk away. The husband ends up in some kind of a, hospice or something like that. All right. So she could have been very proud of her parentage, but that is forbidden. The wife should not be proud of her parental position. She must always be submissive to the husband and must give up all vanity, all false pride. As soon as the wife becomes proud of her parentage, her pride creates great misunderstanding between the husband and wife, and their nuptial or married life is ruined. Devahuti was very careful about that, and therefore it is said, that she gave up all pride completely. Devahuti was not unfaithful. The most sinful activity for a wife is to accept another husband or another lover. So, Muslim men are allowed to have 4 wives legally. Now, they don't always do that, but in, let's say, traditional Muslim countries, it's allowed, it's legal. And so, is that good or bad? Well, in one sense, it may be good because usually there are more women than men. So that means if all the men only have one wife, there's going to be some women that never get married. You know? So in the Muslim countries, they allow one man to have 4 wives. That's legal. You can't have like 50 wives, but you can have 4 wives. But normally it's seen that it's hard enough just to have one wife. Imagine how complicated it gets to have 4 wives. So you have to have a lot of money and you have to be, you can't have all the wives living together in one room. Each wife has to have their own house and for there to be peace. And then the husband spends some time with one wife, then sometimes with the other wife and so forth. But that's the harem, uh, let's say, problem. But generally, it's hard enough just to have one wife and to take good care of her. And but when a man chooses to have many wives, like there are men, the way they get around this is um, they become a let's say a person who has a job where they have to travel all the time. So they have one wife in one city and they have another wife in another city and another wife in another city because he's a traveling salesman, right? So he ends up having 3 or 4 wives, but none of the wives know about it, because he's always traveling. That's his job. Uh, Eventually, uh, you can't hide a thing like that. So eventually, it's all found out, and then he ends up with no wives, because all the wives get angry. They get together and they decide, to dump this guy because he's acting in this very unsavory way.
Maharaj, back in about 100 years back,
Mhm.
back I think in my state, Kerala, Brahmins were allowed to marry in their caste, and they could marry others in the lower caste.
Yeah, they can have more than one wife.
Yeah, they
Okay.
could have more than one wife, and if people had money, they could have they could have legally more than one wife. Then about just about 100 years, my grandfather had 3 wives.
Hmm. Okay.
But after that, after independence, I think the constitution changed and it became just one wife.
No, the Muslims were allowed to have 4 wives.
The Muslims are, I think, in India they're not legally allowed, but they follow their religion than the constitution.
You sure about that?
Yeah, they're allowed to, you're saying, or not allowed?
No, as per the law, they are not allowed to, but they follow their religion more. Religious laws more. So religious laws allow them to do a lot of things.
Well, I think that they were allowed after what do you call independence.
You're saying Muslims are allowed to have multiple wives?
They were allowed,
India.
and now I think Modi's tried to stop it.
Modi put an end to the triple talaq. So if a
Yeah.
husband wants to leave the wife, he
Yeah.
can just say talaq, 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 and the wife is no longer his.
He stopped that.
He stopped. He made that legal, but
Muslim men are allowed
Yeah, that's what it says.
in India to marry up to 4 wives.
Even
So
now?
basically, yeah,
Yeah.
because the Sharia law, I mean, that's where they're trying to get them under the common code, but that requires a majority, and they don't.
So Muslims can still marry 4 wives in India.
But Indian law doesn't follow Sharia.
No, but for Muslims, there is always, that's
I
why.
think there's an act of 1937.
So in India right now, there is 2 different laws that apply like, in India. There is a general law and then there is a Sharia law. For Muslims, it's still separate.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, you see, no, that is unfair because previously a Hindu could marry more than one wife.
See, in India, Muslims are governed by their personal law known as Muslim personal law or Sharia, which is 1937, which allows Muslim men to practice polygamy. This law is distinct from the Hindu Marriages Act of 1955, which enforces monogamy for Hindus, Sikhs, Jains, and Buddhists.
I think they're trying to stop that now.
Yeah, that's what they're trying to get to, uniform civil code,
Yeah.
which would standardize marriage across all religions, potentially outlawing polygamy for all religions.
Polygamy, yeah.
But it's not enacted yet.
But for Muslims also, only the first wife should be the means should be an unmarried girl. Others should be like other widows or means wives of men who were killed in battle. I think there is
Yeah, that's what it's saying here, right? That the other wives should either be orphan
orphan
or widowed. You
That's,
have to take
I
them
think that's the rule, but
I don't think anybody
follows that.
Well, how about the sheikhs? Sometimes they have like, 50
I
wives.
can have more than 4.
Yeah. So one time Muhammad, he normally you're legally about you can have 4 wives in Islam. So one time he had more than 4 wives. So some people were, protesting. Why do you have more than 4 wives? He had like 8 wives. And he said, okay, let me think about this. So he comes back and says, "Oh, I have the answer now. Allah has made a rule that it's okay for me to have more than 4 wives."
Prophet Muhammad, Maharaj,
What?
the Prophet Muhammad,
Yeah.
he had 8 wives. Oh.
So he had, since I was listening to on talk, he had wives plus relationship for total 19 with them.
Okay. But he came back and said, "Well, I thought about this, and Allah told me I can have more than 4 wives."
And when he was 55, his youngest wife was 9 years old.
Okay. Well, he was having a good time, I guess. I don't know.
So according to the Quran, whatever, fourth canto, third verse or whatever, 403. And if you fear that you will not deal justly with the orphan girl, then marry those that please you of other women, 2 or 3 or 4. But if you fear that you will not be just, then marry only one of those your right hand possesses. That is more suitable.
Well, are you supposed to give each wife a separate house? Or they all live like in a
You're
gym,
supposed to take just care.
What's that?
You have to take the right care of these people, I mean, it doesn't. Maybe I can.
No, but yeah, I mean, you put like a bunk bed and you all live together, or each one has a different house. What was the rule?
Yeah.
I mean, it's a fact. It's hard enough having just one wife, Just imagine how complicated it is having 4 wives or more. Yeah.
But as far as the law concerned, they should be equal. They should have equal law for everyone, like in India at least.
Yeah.
So here,
Well, previously, Indian men could have 4 wives.
after independence, they had changed
Yeah. It's
only for
unfair. It's
Hindu.
not fair.
So in Islam, if a Muslim man chooses to marry multiple wives, he is required to provide each wife with fair and just treatment.
Treatment.
Yeah,
That doesn't mean each wife can have her own home.
there's some more detail here. The minimum care and obligations a husband owes to each wife are outlined in Quran and Hadith. These include but not limited to the following acts. The first one is financial maintenance, housing. The husband must provide a separate, appropriate, and a safe place for each wife to live. Each wife should have their own private space. The husband is responsible for ensuring their living conditions are suitable. Clothing and food. The husband must provide his wife's basic needs, including clothing, food, and other essentials according to his means. The quality of this provision should be equitable for all wives. Healthcare. The husband is responsible for ensuring each wife receives adequate health care, including medical treatment when necessary. Next, emotional and marital rights. Equality in time. That is, the husband must divide his time equally among wives.
Is this law?
This is apparently all in Quran and Hadith.
Oh, okay.
If he spends the night with one wife and he must spend an equal amount of time with others. This equitable distribution of time is essential to maintain fairness and prevent any wife from feeling neglected.
Who follows that? I'm sure they don't follow that.
Love and affection. While the husband is expected to treat all wives fairly in terms of material provision, he is also encouraged to show love, respect, and affection to each wife. Emotional neglect is discouraged or favored.
How can a husband work and do all these things that are, necessary to maintain so many wives? It's like crazy. It's like only really very wealthy people can do that. Normal people, it would be very difficult for them.
Yeah. All of this taking care of own family itself, and then we have to take care of children also equally well. Equal treatment of children
Mhm.
from all wives.
Yeah. Well, uh, what's not right is, Christians can only have one wife, Muslims can have 4 wives. That's not right. You know, it should be equal. Either Muslims can only have one wife, or then if they're going to have 4 wives, then the Hindus can have 4 wives also. Making a law saying the Hindus can only have one wife and Muslims can have 4 wives is completely wrong. And I think,
I mean, I'm not saying right or wrong, Maharaj, but if you put that kind of a law, then you are going against the religious. Not saying the rules are right or wrong in the religion. Just saying, if you did that, then you're kind of denying them to practice their religion completely.
in other words, you can't force the Muslims to have only one wife. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, because if their religion allows them to,
Then the solution is that you have to let every man have 4 wives.
So then there will be no end, right? If some other religion will come with 5, so you have to do 5 to everyone. So in US, marrying more than one person is illegal. So US
so
also
Muslims
respect. US also respects.
So what they do is they marry one wife and they have 3 or 4 girlfriends. They have children with them also, and like a traveling salesman. He's always traveling, right? So there's a wife in every city, and the other wives don't know about it. And then when they find out, they all get really angry. So there is the history of the traveling salesman. He had a legitimate reason why he had to be out of the house. So he was in every town that he had to, that he was visiting. He had a wife. You know. Yeah, and there's been examples of men who have, like, 30 wives, even in the United States, uh, because they're traveling salesmen. Uh, they eventually get caught, and it's against the law actually in the United States to be legally married to more than one wife. Uh, so they have, instead of having legal marriage, they have, uh, they do it without marriage. Yeah, it's a very strange world that we live in. Best thing is uh, not to get caught up in, like Srila Prabhupada. At one time, he told his father, he said, "I don't like my wife. I want to get another wife." And the father convinced him not to do it.
So they took this decision in India after independence. So that was a wrong decision. Before independence, it was for everyone. Like everyone was able to marry more than one.
Yeah,
But after independence, they made this only for Muslim. They can marry.
that was a big
Big
mistake.
mistake.
Yeah.
Then they're changing the rule, change for all at that time. And now it becomes like
So are they trying to change the rule now?
Yeah, that's the uniform civil code.
Well, what's it say? Has it already been passed or it's
No. To pass that is like the government needs to earn absolute majority,
uh-huh.
but
They want to have that?
BJP is trying to push for that.
It's what's that? The Hindu men can marry more than one wife?
Nobody can,
Uh-huh.
including Muslims, nobody can have more than one wife.
Okay. That's going to be really hard.
but I can assume that during the after independence, it must be easy because they are changing the law.
Hmm.
So they made a mistake that time.
Yeah.
Only for exception for Muslims. Like years.
Well, Muslim men like it. They can have more than one wife. Okay. So I think we're over time. So we'll let the Muslims have more than one wife.
And one clarification. In the beginning of the purport, today's purport, it says, although a wife may be equal to her husband in advancement in spiritual consciousness, she should not be vainly proud. So my question is, this should be applicable for husband as well. Is that correct?
No,
Husband should also not be proud or
no, he should be. Uh, there's, everything now is everything has to be equal, right? The wife and the husband have to be equal, but in order to have a peaceful marriage, the husband should always be superior to the wife, and the wife should be submissive to the husband.
superior is yes, Maharaj, but the question is about the advancement in spiritual consciousness. So the husband should not be proud for their advancement as well, right? So that's the question.
So it said, although a wife may be equal to her husband in advancement, spiritual consciousness, she should not be vainly proud. Sometimes it happens that the wife comes from a very rich family, as did Devahuti, the daughter of Emperor Swayambhuva. She could have been very proud of her parentage, but that is forbidden. A wife should not be proud of her parental position. She must always be submissive to the husband and must give up all vanity, all pride. As soon as the wife becomes proud of her parentage, her pride creates great misunderstanding between the husband and wife, and their nuptial life or married life is ruined. Devahuti was very careful about that. So here, the point being made here is that uh, although a wife may be equal to her husband in advancement in spiritual consciousness, she should not be vainly proud. Sometimes it happens that the wife comes from a very rich family, as the Devahuti, the daughter of the Emperor Swayambhuva. She could have been very proud of her parentage, but that is forbidden. A wife should not be proud of her parental position. She must always be submissive to the husband and must give up all vanity or all pride. As soon as the wife becomes proud of her parentage, her pride creates great misunderstanding between the husband and wife, and their nuptial life is ruined.
And also, isn't it contrary, Maharaj, like advancement in spiritual consciousness and being proud, kind of opposite, isn't it?
Well, usually the more one is advanced spiritually, the more humble they become.
Yes.
So this whole issue of being proud is not good. Yeah,
Prabhuji, is your question,
yeah,
if the husband is more spiritually advanced than the wife,
yeah.
is it okay for him to feel proud about that, or
Yeah,
he should not feel proud, just like what we are telling you? That's what.
Yeah, but the whole point is that how can you be spiritually advanced if you're proud to start with? Yeah.
Well, the point is that whether you're husband or wife, you should not be falsely proud, and you should be always. Well, when one makes a lot of spiritual advancement, they become more and more, uh, free of that false pride, and they are very humble. It all depends if you can control the senses and the mind. If you control the senses and mind, then you become very humble. But still, the wife respects her husband because of his humility, because of his spiritual advancement. And therefore she naturally, loves her husband because of his good qualities. Now, if the wife feels superior to her husband, then that's a big problem. Uh, but if the wife really has a husband who's actually a genuine devotee and who's a very humble person, she should be happy to be married to someone like that, and be naturally accept to be, let's say, completely dedicated to the husband. She must always be submissive to the husband and must give up all vanity, all pride. As soon as the wife becomes proud of her parentage, her pride creates great misunderstanding between the husband and wife, and their nuptial or married life is ruined. There it is. Devahuti was very careful about that, and therefore it is said here that she gave up pride completely. So that's if you want to have a happy marriage. If you don't want to have a happy marriage, well, do whatever you want to do, but it's going to be a problem.
That is very interesting, Maharaj. Whatever Vedic culture says nowadays, exactly
The
opposite.
opposite.
Exactly opposite.
Yeah.
And that is to like mm, more official opposite, like from corporate world and from the communities. Exactly opposite. Like men and women should be equal. They are like becoming more and more norm.
Equality. Everybody wants to be equal, but no one is equal. You look in practically at life, uh, no one is equal. There are always some people that are superior to other people, by birth and so forth. So, and we see, uh, when a man becomes very rich, oftentimes he has more than one wife, even though it's not permitted. But he'll have these paramours. He'll have girlfriends. Like look at Elon Musk, right? As an example. He's been married what 9 kids by 3 or 4 wives, uh, and he thinks that well, I'm improving the the quality of the population. I want to spread my genes, so more and more young children are, you know, uh, develop these superior genes like mine. That's a complete nonsense statement. It just shows how falsely proud he is, just because he has a lot of money. Okay, so if there are no questions, then there are no more answers, and then
Hare Krishna, I have one question.
okay, go ahead.
When you said a woman should not become overly proud about her parental status, do you also mean like she shouldn't be overly proud like when she has children, like when she has a baby, like she shouldn't be overly proud about that? Like that'll cause problems in the marriage?
Well, see, as soon as the wife becomes proud of her parentage, her pride creates great misunderstanding between husband and wife, and their nuptial or their married life is ruined. Devahuti was very careful about that, and therefore it is said that she gave up pride completely. Devahuti was not unfaithful. The most sinful activity for a wife is to accept another husband or another lover. Well, that's what Prabhupada is writing here, and that should be the general rule in marriage.
Hare Krishna, I think maybe she's asking here, parentage means where you came from, your father and mother, the qualifications of your work before you got married. That is what they're mentioning by parentage, not having a child and how you parent.
Okay, yeah. But here it says David Huti could have been very proud of her parentage, but that is forbidden. The wife should not be proud of her parental position. She must always be submissive to her husband and must not give up all vanity. And must give up all vanity. As soon as the wife becomes proud of her parentage, her pride creates great misunderstanding between the husband and wife, and their married life is ruined. That's the general rule if you want to have a happy marriage. Yeah. David Hutu is very careful about that. And therefore it is said here that she gave up pride completely.
Comes from a king's family.
Yeah.
Family.
Well, whether it's a woman or a man, this question of pride is problematic. You know, the more a devotee is advanced, the more humble he becomes, or should become. As soon as we become proud of something that's false, like parentage or intelligence or something, it creates problems. So the most, let's say, successful marriages are when the husband is very humble and always takes good care of the wife and the children, and does not have, let's say, a false idea of being Superman. You know, uh, that doesn't mean it's a weak person just because he's very humble. That means he's a very strong person. You know. Uh, uh, So we should respect, the wife should respect the husband like that. Uh, so in the world during World War I, uh, there was a soldier in the United States Army who was highly decorated. Uh, uh, but he was a very humble man, right? So one time his wife was interviewed. So, what do you think about your husband? And she said, "Oh, I love him very much." And they said, "Well, how come you love him so much?" She said, "Because he's a very humble man, and he's a very brave man." And uh, so he was a highly decorated soldier because he killed a lot of people, put it like that. But he didn't kill people for the pleasure of it. He was a very, let's say, highly decorated soldier, and his wife, loved the fact that he was uh, such a highly decorated soldier. Right? He was very brave. He always risked his life. He always helped save the lives of, other soldiers who were wounded and things like that. See, now, this particular person never killed anybody. He refused to. He was a nonviolent person, but he did not refuse to go into the army. But he was like a medic, you know. So, but he became famous because he went behind enemy lines and freed soldiers who were injured, and he risked going, and he never had a gun, and he risked his life going behind enemy lines and uh, freed soldiers who were wounded and who would have been killed normally, right? So his wife was very proud of him because he was so brave, and but at the same time, uh, he refused to have a gun, and but he did not refuse to go into the army and serve. And he saved the lives of a lot of men, oftentimes behind going into areas where the enemy, so-called enemy, was present, and he risked his life to save soldiers who were wounded. So the wife had a lot of respect for her husband because he was willing to risk his life to save other people's lives, other soldiers' lives. And he became a very famous man, but he was always very humble. He never, uh, advertised himself as being some great person. So the wife really had a lot of respect for her husband. Okay, so we'll stop there. Thank
Hare
you.
Krishna. I just
Yes.
want to make sure I understood correctly. The reason why I asked that question is because I noticed like a lot of American men, they get jealous when the woman has the baby and she's like overly caring for the children and she's not really catering to him as much as she did before the child was born. So is that wrong for the woman to do that? I understand the other part about the parental, but I was just trying to make sure I understood this part correctly.
Okay, that's a very good question. Uh, a husband who's, let's say, has, good intelligence, he can understand the situation of his wife, who, especially, who has the first child. I mean, the wife is overwhelmed because now she has to not only take care of the child, but she has to also take care of the husband, and her whole life is turned upside down. Let's put it like that. Before, when there was no child, uh, everything was relatively easy for her. Now she has a child who's waking up, every day 3 o'clock in the morning and crying, and she has to wake up also. And so her husband might be able to sleep through all that, but she can't. So it puts a lot of pressure on her, you know. And sometimes, the women, they just, especially if they're working, they're forced to work to maintain the family. It becomes too much for them. And sometimes they just give up, walk away. So it's hard, especially if the wife doesn't have support of her family because the husband took her, like, say, on the other side of the world. And now she doesn't have that family support. And she's expected to do all these things. Whereas before she was, relatively very happy, didn't have a lot of, and was with her family and was protected. And now she's far away from the family and has to do all these things that are very stressful. Having the baby is already extremely stressful. And now, she has to take care of the baby, and it's going to last for, at least 15 to 20 years, you know. So it's very daunting. It causes a lot of psychological stress. And if the husband is not, let's say, helpful, it's just even worse. The husband wants to have more kids, more kids, more kids. And the wife, at a certain point, said, "No more kids. I don't care what you say." And then the husband gets angry and starts finding, other women. So everything's confused today. So it's very hard for women to get married today and keep their sanity.
That's why girls don't want to get married.
Well,
Don't want to take up the responsibility.
it's going to cause another problem.
Definitely.
There won't be enough people to do everything, keep society going. Uh, there's always going to be a problem in the material world. Let's put it like that.
Yeah.
So, best thing is for men to protect their wives and understand, how stressful it is for a woman to have a baby. It's very, very stressful. And the wife is always at a risk because even today, with all the doctors and hospitals, still women die because there's childbirth. Imagine what it was like, 100 years ago, 200 years ago. A lot of women would die, you know, just by having childbirth. Okay, Haribol,
Very
all glories to Prabhupada.